to the Nightcap. We are now 167 days away from the midterms, and today, 2 police officers who were attacked during the January 6 riots at the Capitol sued to block Donald Trump's $1.776 billion so-called anti-weaponization fund. Officers Harry Dunn and Daniel Hodges filed suit against Scott Bessent and the Treasury Department, saying the fund is straight up illegal. Even some Republicans on Capitol Hill seem uncomfortable with Trump's settlement. Senate Majority Leader John Thune said he's, quote, not a fan of the fund, and that he is not sure how the Trump administration intends to use it. Really? He's not sure? I think he is. Today, Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania said the Republicans would try to kill the fund, and they are looking at their legislative options. A couple of things to know about Brian Fitzpatrick. He just won his primary uncontested last night, so he is safe from a Trump-backed challenger. And his district went to Kamala Harris by less than a point in 2024. Now, when it comes to just who might get these hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm going to share it with the New York Times framed it. January 6 rioters are elated at Trump's fund. January 6 rioters, Proud Boys, leaders Enrique Tarrio said, quote, it is a good direction. We've got a lot to cover, but you're in luck. We have a superb nightcap here. Philip Bump, senior data editor and columnist for the CT Insider, Ron Insana, who is now an MS contributor and publisher of The Message of the Markets on Substack. Lizzie O'Leary, her first visit to the Nightcap, host of What Next, TBD, Slate's podcast about tech, power, and the future. And a man we have not seen in a while, and we are glad to have him back, Charles Coleman Jr., former New York prosecutor and civil rights attorney. Okay, Charles, we're going to start with you. And Lizzie, welcome.
Thank you.
I hadn't seen Lizzie in 10 years, and this week, it's twice in 1 week. It is a privilege. What are the chances that this lawsuit from these 2 officers succeeds? And how vulnerable is this fund to other legal challenges, right? This is just day 1, and there's already a lawsuit.
I think that first and foremost, a big part of what we're looking at here, Stephanie, is about venue. Who is the judge that this goes before? Legally speaking, I think that Officer Dunn and his co-petitioner are on strong grounds to move forward with blocking this fund taking place. I also think that Congress could do a whole lot to help that out. In the meantime, whether that will happen remains to be seen. But sticking strictly to what was going to happen in the courts, that's going to depend on how much a judge is going to be willing to entertain their arguments based off of whatever they've asserted in their pleadings and then whatever they sort of argue going forward. I think it's a good shot, legally speaking. However long it's allowed to linger is going to depend on whether a judge is going to allow for some novel legal arguments to take place in order to support the fund.
What does it say about the current political environment that there is already a Republican congressman in a moderate district saying on the record they're going to kill this settlement?
Well, I think it's a sign that Republicans understand that this midterm election is shaping up to be very bad for them. I mean, it's already shaping up to be bad for them. It was going to be bad for them no matter what Donald Trump had done, just because when a new president comes in, it tends to be bad for his party. Donald Trump has done nothing but make it worse. The war in Iran, causing gas prices to go up, with tariffs, with the various, the ballroom, all these
but if they don't stand in lockstep with them, they don't win their primaries.
I know, but the primaries are now over, to your point, right? The primaries are out of the way, and so a lot of these people now have the space to move toward the middle, which is what you normally see. And so they recognize that this is toxic. This is napalm. Like, the people who are excited about this are literally people who are convicted of terroristic threats against the Capitol or, storming the building. Like, those are the people who are most excited about it because they see this as potentially putting money in their pocket. That is bad politics. And Republicans, I think, understand in general, if you're giving $1.8 billion to someone, much less doing so under this absolutely contrived idea that there was some sort of weaponization, which is just total nonsense, like, that's bad politics. And so I think you're going to see people who are at least not willing to stand up and say, hey, we think this is good, the way they are with the ballroom, where you can at least make an argument for it.
Lizzie,
not a good one.
Between the terrible political optics, the legal challenges, potential action from Congress, and the high possibility that a future administration is going to throw this deal completely out, there's a good chance this thing won't actually survive. Yet, Donald Trump is pursuing it. What should we take away from that?
That he still thinks he has the juice to get enough members of his party to fall in line. But I kind of agree with Philip. Like, I think you have people like Bill Cassidy, who doesn't care anymore, right? He's willing to just go out there and say whatever he wants at this point. Tom Tillis, who can look at his state and see what a purple state looks like. I don't know. I mean, I feel like every time we come to some Rubicon crossing moment, I think, oh, this is it. This is the moment. And then it doesn't happen and they fall in lockstep anyway. But at a certain point, when you back primary challenges again and again and again, you are going to lose members of your own party.
Let's talk about the business community, because we are talking about a massive fund that Trump allies can control, plus an enormous pass from any sort of tax audit for Donald Trump, his family, and his business. What are your sources in the business world telling you? Because I'll tell you, I called a CEO before we knew about this fund, when it was Trump still suing for $10 billion. And the CEO I called said, you know what? Lena Khan blocking business cost me more. I don't care, and hung up.
That's not something I've heard. I would say that talking to a tax attorney yesterday, it's intriguing as to whether or not this would set a precedent for others in a similar situation, because this is a private citizen. It's not just the president who's being granted this settlement, by the way, and then the future indemnification, if you will, of any IRS examinations. What does that mean for anybody else who's in a similar situation? Will they be allowed to tell the IRS, no, you can't investigate me because you're not investigating another private citizen who has a beef with the IRS? Also interesting, which I was reading this evening, is that this is coming in the form of a settlement to Donald Trump. And one individual makes the argument that this is a taxable event for him, that he could owe hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes on the settlement. And there's a 6-year look back from the IRS that means the next IRS commissioner might bill the president several $100 million for the $1.8 billion that he is in receipt of. That, to me, is intriguing.
You know, Stephanie, I'm listening to Ron talk, and I appreciate being in the weeds around the tax implications, especially from a legal standpoint.
Yeah.
But I feel a however coming.
I don't want us to sort of like rush past the plot here.
No, of course not. Of course not.
I think, and I think,
and the plot being, this is crazy.
This is absolutely insane. There is one thing to advance notions of political ideology, or even if we want to go and double down on that, the notion of what a patriot looks like. It's an entirely different thing to utilize and weaponize the Justice Department and the courts as a means of making it profitable to break the law.
And even more important, I think, is that the families of the policemen and other officers who died and the policemen themselves who were traumatized by this are not eligible to receive any of this, and they are the true victims in all of this, not the ones who perpetrated the crime. So I think even more so, that's critical to this conversation.
I also think that we should keep in mind that the people who are going to get the biggest payouts here are probably not the January 6th rioters. It's the cronies. It's the people who, it's the Steve Bannon.
The Michael
exactly.
Wants $400 million.
Right. And I also think it's important, like, it's hard for us as human beings to conceive of how much money $1.8 billion is. It is equivalent. I went back and looked at the math. In 2023, it is equivalent to $3 of every $100 that was paid by residents of Connecticut in that fiscal year. 3 out of every $100 is now going into this fund that is going to go to Donald Trump's friends because he's settling with a case that the IRS itself said they weren't going to be able to win, right? And that the judge said, well, there is no settlement agreement when she dismissed the case.
More money than is going to the southeastern United States for COVID relief, disaster relief. Like, that's 1.2. It's just a staggering amount of money.
But if we look at Tuesday and we think about what it means for
Tuesday meaning yesterday, Thomas Massey losing.
Correct. If we look at that, it's a very interesting juxtaposition to watch MAGA sort of contract as a party under Donald Trump, while the rest of the party that is not necessarily centrist MAGA having to try and maintain some degree of an appeal to either people who are on the fringe that identify as GOP or independents that they will need come November. So this split, to me, is very interesting because the folks who are in that latter group, they're not necessarily going to be in support of something like this.
All right, let's talk about a new topic, Iran. Today, the president said he is in no hurry to end the war, and he brushed off the idea that it could hurt him in the midterms.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know that the war hurts him in the midterms. There's new polling came out from Fox today. About 40% of Americans support the war, which is not very high, but it's also not dismal. I think that's in part just because we've reached this point of stasis. Nothing's changed in the past month or so. But of course, the real issue is the gas prices. Gas prices are high. Gas prices continue to be high. I was in New London today where Donald Trump was giving his speech, and I was at a gas station. I asked the guy where gas was $4.59 outside. Well, how much has it gone up? He said it's gone up $1.50 in the past 6 months, right? And everyone that I talked to was like, this is hurting my business. That's the issue, right? It's not Iran. If the Strait of Hormuz gets worked out and gas prices go back down, maybe things are better. But Iran itself isn't the issue.
But for the first time, the Senate actually advanced a war powers resolution to end the war. It's still probably not going to go anywhere, but it's significant that it happened.
I think it's significant that it happened, and I think it's significant that you have GOP senators on the record talking about it. And you had GOP senators in their, Tuesday luncheons talking about this. They are aware that they are saddled with these gas price increases. They are aware that they are tied to this. And people do not like it, and it costs a lot of money to individuals, to businesses, to anyone who wanted to go on a summer vacation flight.
Well, I saw something fascinating from the Gas Buddy folks, that for every day the Strait of Hormuz is closed, it's a week that production out of the Middle East is down and cannot be returned to normal. So we're at 78 weeks right now, which takes us to November of 2027. If the ceasefire is put in place tomorrow for another 30 days, the Strait doesn't open. So then you get to 118 days or 118 weeks before world oil production goes back to normal. That means prices can't come down nearly as much as the president or the Treasury Secretary is suggesting. That has political and economic implications for certain.
How are they going to campaign, though? You just walked us through, here's where gas prices are. Donald Trump is doing the worst he's done at handling the economy. So here we have just a few months to go. And while Trump might not actually care, right, he's making so much money personally, right? He's so thrilled personally. He might not actually care about the midterms nearly as much as he did last time around. But for real, whether you're Donald Trump or another Republican right now, the majority of the American people hate politics. They hate politicians. They don't like either party. They care about the cost of living. They care about education. They care about health care. What are Republicans going to campaign on, given the price of all those things right now?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about Trump, but I think it's important to remember Trump is also much more isolated in a bubble than he was in the first term. He has
but
only
happy in that bubble, in a gilded
but
cage.
yeah, that's why he created it, right? Republicans are going to run on. I mean, look, I feel like I was on this show a year and a half ago and said, the one thing we need to anticipate is that at some point Republicans are going to get past their primaries and then be stuck being tied to Trump and having to win general elections. I swear, I must have said it.
Today's that day.
Yes, in case I didn't, I'll say it now. This is the issue. This has always been the issue, that Donald Trump does not care about them winning their races beyond, and his only strategy basically is to say, they're going to impeach me, look out, and he honestly believes that there is this huge base of people who love him and will come out and vote for it, because he saw that in 2024 and he saw that in 2016. Republicans, though, are just stuck. They're stuck. I live in a district with a Republican legislator, and you see him trying to walk this line between, like, yeah, I'm close to Trump, but I also do all these other things. And it's never going to work, because you can't be close to Trump and advocating for the people, because Trump is the antithesis of advocating for the people by the policies that he's enacting.
Okay, but then let me just go back to a person who spent years advocating for Donald Trump as his private attorney, and now he's our acting attorney general.
Sure.
Todd Blanche just yesterday was testifying in front of Congress, and they were grilling him on his past as the president's private attorney, and he got testy. Watch this.
I'm the acting attorney general, okay? The fact that I used to be President Trump's lawyer is just a fact, but I'm the acting attorney general. So don't say the president's former personal lawyer will do something. The acting attorney general will do something.
Mr. Attorney General, you are acting today like the president's personal attorney, and that's the whole problem. You have a whole banner of his face hanging over the Department of Justice, and you and everybody else walks under it. And you are acting like you're his current personal attorney.
Charles.
Well, I mean, I think what we just saw tells the story. Todd Blanche would like to use this as a shield to avoid any substantive inquiry as to his qualifications and ability to perform the job. Now, in his defense, speaking objectively, one could argue that his predecessor acted almost like his personal attorney, in as much as the DOJ has been weaponized to do the bidding of the administration. And Pam Bondi, when she walked into that position, was an attorney who had a lot more credibility walking into the office than she left with walking out. So
she also received the campaign contribution from Donald Trump in the first go around.
So from his perspective, it's kind of a requirement for getting and keeping the job.
I would argue Todd Blanche loves having this fight. Because having this fight about what his job used to be and how he's presenting himself, that's just noise. It actually has nothing to do with his job. It has nothing to do with the American people. It has nothing to do with anything that actually matters to voters. So he'd love to have this silly fight and get these sound bites on cable. It means nothing. It's just a show. And the person he's performing for is the president.
That's the part I was just about to say. At the end of the day, regardless of whatever legislators he was talking to, whatever cameras were in the room, there was an audience of one that he understands he is continuously auditioning for and in an interview for. And as long as that person is not only entertained but also approved, he's fine. And it's a sad state of affairs because the real issue here is the expectation that we are coming to have around not only the Department of Justice, but the Attorney General of the United States of America, which I cannot stress enough to viewers how important a position that is and is supposed to be.
I got to move on because before we go to the break, I want to just take a moment to talk about someone else. Former Congressman Barney Frank, who died today. He was the first member of Congress to voluntarily come out as gay. He was an architect of the legendary Dodd-Frank Act for Wall Street reform. You covered him. I mean, for me, he was one of the most entertaining, curmudgeon-y. I mean, at one point, in the middle of an interview, he said to me, I have to use the toilet, and then came back. But I just couldn't. And guess what? We just sat and went to commercial and waited for him to come back. What kind of legacy does he leave behind? He was a brave, brave man, outspoken.
I was going to say, at least he came back.
He did.
Yeah. I mean, I think he is one of a type of legislator who are in very rare supply these days.
He was one of one.
Yeah. I mean, yes, but he was also of an era in which you could be different and you could be distinct and you could advocate for your constituents in a way that was real to you and real to your constituency, even if it put you at odds with your party and put you at odds with everyone else on the Hill. And we need more of those people. We need more people who are willing to be themselves as opposed to being just part of a cluster of folks who are just trying to do what their party wants them to.
So, apropos of that, I mean, I think of my friend Leon Panetta, who I still talk to these days. I think of Ernest Hollings. I think of Sam Nunn. I think of Pete Domenici. That class of senator and congressman in those days, irrespective of their political difference, were able to sit down across the aisle, interact socially and politically, get things done.
Leon would not say I have to use the toilet in the middle.
No, Leon would not. No, Leon's, we'll talk later about that with Leon. But that class of elected official, they got the job done, irrespective of their political differences, and there was a certain amount of decorum among them. And I think Barney encapsulated that a great deal. His bathroom breaks notwithstanding, but I mean, he also was a fascinating interview. He always said what was on his mind.
He also would say, that's the stupidest question I've ever heard.
100%, yes. Yeah.
That's 100% true. All right, nobody is going anywhere. We're going to save my stupidest questions for the next segment. Coming up later, South Carolina re-enters the redistricting chat, the new effort to weaken the only Democratic seat in the whole entire state. But first, right after the break, moments before the president halted strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure, money, power, politics. For months now, the war in Iran has been taking a toll on Americans' wallets. We were just talking about it. But while many families are struggling to fill up their gas tanks and pay for groceries, some traders and big-time investors out there are getting lucky off the war's market chaos. So lucky, in fact, that regulators are starting to take a closer look. According to the Wall Street Journal, the CFTC, or Commodity Futures Trading Commission, is now scrutinizing a flurry of suspicious oil trades made literally moments before the president postponed an attack on Iran's energy infrastructure in late March. Oh, really? They just started looking now? The trades accounted for more than $800 million worth of U.S. and international oil futures. People familiar with the matter said the CFTC is trying to gauge whether an insider with prior knowledge of Trump's change of heart traded on said information or leaked it to someone who could. The nightcap is still here. Okay, Ron.
Yes, ma'am.
What's your reaction?
There are no coincidences. You don't get a trade that close to an event that somebody doesn't know about. I've been doing this almost as long as you've been alive. And when people who actually engage in this practice...
That's how he gets invited here.
Look, it is a serious thing. There's no way in which someone did not have inside information in those trades. It's not coincidental. I've known people who have engaged in it, and in the old days, it was done in a much different way. This is as blatant an abuse as I've ever seen. And again, if it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. There's no reason to say anything otherwise.
Okay, well, people that are familiar with the investigation have said that some of the firms that were approached by the regulators attributed their trading activity to just a headline that had come out a few minutes before about the White House looking to end the war. This headline came out about 15 minutes before the president's announcement. That's what they're claiming their excuse for this is. How hard is something like this to prove, A, and B, how do we know if the CFTC is really digging into and going after it? Or at the very least, are they just trying to save face because there is so much noise around this from people who say this stinks to the high heavens?
Well, to your first question, it's not that hard at all because of technology. If we were talking about a conversation where it was really trying to track down who was involved and who had their hand in what, without the aid of being able to do forensic, accounting, if you will, and work backwards, that would be a very different conversation. We are not, which then turns to your second question. If the investigation is thorough enough and people are invested in doing their jobs, they will get to the right answers. That's a big if. And we all know that, which is why we're sitting around the table even asking the question.
But people were convicted of insider trading in 1929 or after 1929, the crash, when they were shorting their own stocks. The CEO of some of the banks in New York were doing that. And they found out then, without the technology that we have today, to get those fingerprints and identify who the perpetrators were.
More and more Americans are getting angrier and angrier about the grift and headlines like this. Do we need to hear from Democrats about what their game plan is?
Yes.
When and if they win in November, here's what they are going to do.
And they don't seem to be unified on that either. You had the clip from Chris Van Hollen. I talked to him not too long ago and went around and around about, what kind of assurances do you have from fellow Democrats, from leaders, about what something might look like if you all have majorities? And they're all kind of doing this. You have a bunch of squirrels in a bag who can't seem to figure out who is supposed to be leading that charge.
New topic. In a hearing today, lawmakers heard from officials in the gaming and prediction market industries. Both have obviously faced increased scrutiny about their marketing tactics, potential insider trading. But all they've gotten is public scrutiny. While they're getting public scrutiny, their valuations are to the highest of high heavens. They're making $1 gazillion. Do you actually think that lawmakers are getting any closer to any real thoughtful regulation, right? I did something with Richard Blumenthal just a couple months ago. He said this is a top focus for him, especially what it's doing to young men. We hear all that noise. But Polymarket and Kalshi are anywhere and everywhere. They've got the biggest investors out there. Any conference you go to, they're on the biggest stages with the investment community cheering them on. And what's really behind lawmakers? The investment community donating to their campaigns, much like these companies are donating to their campaigns.
Yeah, no, exactly right. I mean, I think to Lizzie's point, too, that I think Democrats are feeling very complacent about the midterms and not feeling a lot of urgency and don't really necessarily feel like stepping on the toes of the people who are engaged in this stuff. I mean, look, I don't want to be overly blunt here, but essentially we live in a moment in which, from the point at which GameStop stock became this fun thing that people were goofing around with, right? That people now see trading things and gambling as intermingled in the same thing. And Polymarket and Kalshi have been very good at leveraging that, at getting people to give them money.
The world.
100%. Yeah, exactly. And so we see all of these bets and we see how people are making money, these insider trades. I don't think it's a coincidence that we just learned that Donald Trump himself had made 3,600 individual stock trades.
3,700.
My apologies.
That is one every 6.6 minutes of a trading day.
Yeah, right. Like this is the spirit of the economy in the moment. It is this bet on a thing that's going to happen, make some money on it, and if you have to run a hustle to do it, then you have to run a hustle. Like, it seems obvious that this is something that is going to be looked back on in the same way that we look back in the early days of social media as being like, what the hell were we doing? Like, this is that moment, and it is a time for legislators to step up, but no one's ever going to put money on legislators stepping up.
Well, on top of that, listen, every sports league, every news organization, every company that you can find is doing business with them as well. So where is the, pushback going to come from?
It drives me insane to see people who talk about polls also talking about these markets. It's bananas.
And remember, Don Jr. an advisor to both Polymarket and Kalshi. I mean, that is the fact.
And a drone company that's getting a defense contract.
Correct.
Yeah.
While the president is getting a lot of criticism today from some Republican lawmakers, from some voters, one of the biggest names in business talked about the president earlier today and had very nice things. Jeff Bezos. Let's watch.
I'm comparing him to his first term, and I think he is a more mature, more disciplined version of himself than he was in his first term. Trump has lots of good ideas, and he's been right about a lot of things. You have to give him credit where credit is due.
Wow. Jeff Bezos is not singular. He's one of many CEOs that are courting Donald Trump. It's worked for him in the last 12 months. It's very, very different from the position he was in with Donald Trump in Donald Trump's first term. But what's your take on this?
I'm not
Donald
sure that I
Trump
would
more
go with
disciplined.
More disciplined if you can just look at the posts that are coming out in the middle of
Or that we're 10 weeks into
the night.
a war?
Yeah. With no particular strategy or one that seems to change every single day.
It just takes such an immense amount of courage to praise a president when you're a government contractor and you are living off taxpayer dollars and you have $240 billion in the bank.
And you want to be
made her happy about his wife.
Right, and you do not want to be taxed any more than you currently are. I don't know. It's mind-boggling to me that someone who is presumably as independent and free in a certain sense of any kind of constraints even bothers to make those types of comments.
And you would like the contracts that SpaceX has, that you are very aware of those.
Yeah.
So Bezos also dismissed any fears of an AI bubble. We know that OpenAI is now sort of turbocharging their plans to IPO. Just last night, we were talking about SpaceX, which could end up with this gargantuan IPO, making Elon Musk just mind-blowingly wealthier. Put all of that together with Jeff Bezos' comments today, and what are your concerns? How high is your level of concern about our divided economy, our disconnected economy, and the rage on one side? Because while I totally appreciate that, hey, these are business guys and they want to court the president because it works for them, if we continue to divide this much, they might have the president on their side. We could lose capitalism over this.
Look, I mean, the wealth gap is so wide now, it's unfathomable. Once SpaceX goes public, and it's likely to have a $2 trillion valuation, that will be the largest valuation put on a company since Saudi Aramco, and it'll be even more than Saudi Aramco. And so Elon Musk will be a trillionaire, right? For the first time in history, somebody will be a trillionaire. We couldn't 20 years ago fathom being a billionaire. He's going to be a trillionaire. And so I think, when you look also at Anthropic's going to go public with at least a $300 billion valuation. OpenAI may have a $1 trillion valuation if and when it goes public. It looks like it's going to file soon.
Well, we might be facing a global food crisis.
Correct. And so, again, this wealth gap, both domestically and globally, is extraordinary. And, look, I know NVIDIA blew their numbers out the doors today, and it was a great earnings report, revenues, profits, everything. I still think that within a year or two, we will find out that a large degree of this was very much a bubble, and it will burst one day when the Fed raises interest rates, when somebody misses numbers. We'll have, I don't know if we do a full 1999 style event, but something adverse will happen in the financial markets.
Can I make a very quick point?
Really quick.
People at home, this is a millimeter. If you have 1 million of those, imagine that's $1, 1 million of those is a kilometer. If you have as much money as Elon Musk is worth, you have enough millimeters to go on the Artemis mission to the back of the moon.
You are such a dork, and I love you for it. Everybody is staying right here. When we return, South Carolina Republicans are trying to dismantle the state's lone Democratic district as Trump applies more pressure to redraw maps ahead of the midterms. We're going to break it down next.